What's up, YouTube? HudsonFan15 back with a contest response for Joshjohnson55, Amish Dave. So, got a lot to get to here, but as per the parameters of the contest, got a substantial amount of time to do it. Dave and I have been friends and fellow single National League Baseball pitcher collectors for years, so we have this sort of camaraderie that exists that only people who chase below top tier, arguably mediocre players for years on end and are synonymous with them amongst this community can possibly understand. In watching his contest video, I understand now how a lot of this synchronicity and personalities has come to be. He talks for a great length about, and I've never been accused of brevity myself, about his struggles just within one's own mind, and how you can find yourself in a certain type of headspace. I went through a stretch of my life, better part of 8 or 9 years, where just a series of family members all died. Through cancer, through natural causes for some of the older ones, freak heart condition, which potentially had something to do with the use of performance-enhancing drugs, because he's a bodybuilder. Cousin died the age I am now, 31 years old. And capped off with a best friend who hit high school and then was all of a sudden too cool to deal with somebody who's not in high school and then going to be an underclassman. And it put me in a very bad place. And I was depressed. I did go through years of therapy and medication and everything else. And if you ask anyone who's been through that for their honest opinions, one of two things will happen. One of three things will happen. First thing is they'll lie to you, because they're sensitive about it, they're touchy about it, whatever the case may be. Number two, they'll tell you that whatever methods that they went through to change how they saw things worked, and they are better people for it. And then the third group, which I feel like I'm firmly in the category of, have a reaction that's more like somebody who's in AA, which is take it one day at a time, take it one issue at a time. You understand that you're flawed. You understand that there are things in life that you cannot control, and you must give up the idea of trying to control them, and only try to affect change of things that you can accept. And all that translates into one very simple phrase. What therapy did for me was it taught me how to answer the questions that I was being asked in a way to make people stop asking them. Because it's not a physical ailment. It's not looking at a bone that's broken. Well, it's an apt reference for the next portion, where you can see obviously whether or not something has healed. There are symptoms that can be so subtle that you'll never identify them from the outside. A lot of it comes from introspection and a willingness to then share that with whomever is trying to guide you through it. And there is no one right path, and this is what makes the system that we have in place to treat mental illness in this country so very, very flawed, is that there are no right answers for everyone. It has to be highly individualized. It has to be case by case. You don't know how a combination of different potential symptoms can affect people. And then you're also balancing a mental state with a physical being and how a body is going to react to different things that are introduced into it. It wasn't until I dealt with somebody who understood that adding coping skills to a therapy regime was the way to at least get me over the hump to where I was functional. And I wasn't just shutting down in the face of adversity. So, to add to his point number 2 about obstacles, going through one right now. We have had a series of very bad winter storms up here in the Northeast. I know, Dave, to you and all across the Midwest, you say suck it up, and at least it's not dumping 7 feet or whatever, but it's enough. And my wife and I went to go out and shovel, and I had to get some things out of the back portion of the house, and I came to the front portion of the house where she had already said that she was going to start and at least clear the stairs, and then we were going to go in 2 different directions on the path and meet in the middle. And I found her at a heap in the bottom of the stairs because she somehow lost her balance. May have been her occasional flare-up knee injury. It might have been ice. We don't know. And she has a broken foot. She goes for surgery on Thursday, so you will see another hiatus from me while I'm tending to her recovery. So that is going to be something where I'm going to put these learned coping skills and up to and including answering questions of people in a way that will make them stop asking the questions. If I'm okay and whatever else, I will be worried for a very long period of time, perpetually, until she is healthy again, and nothing other than her established health for a substantial period of time is going to change that. So that's the reality of the situation, and that's how it's going to be. So we will deal with this new obstacle in the best way that we know how, and that's loving each other and communicating with each other and relying on each other for support. What drives you? Boy, and that's something that I ask myself a lot, and I can never quite identify. And I think, let me rephrase that. For a long period of time, I couldn't identify. And now it's seeing what this life that I've made with my wife is going to yield. What can we do together? What sort of life can we have together? What sort of happiness can we make together? Before that, I didn't really have any idea. There was the typical pie in the sky thoughts that people have about what they can make their lives and whatnot, that I'm sure everybody has in their own fashion, but there was no basis in reality. I was just sort of existing and playing it safe and not wanting to really go out and explore what life had to offer. I had things that would just sort of fall in my lap that would be safe, and I take them and do them, and whatever else, and then that'd be it. And I was at a point where the only way that I knew how to exist with any even marginal happiness was to just not emotionally invest in anything. And she changed that to where I have to be emotionally invested, and I'm glad that I became emotionally invested in her. And part of it was the timing of that, because I met her shortly after my grandmother passed away, who was the final person out of that whole group. She didn't become sick until much later, so I count her separate, and also because she actually came to live with us for the last 3 years of her life. And the timing of that, I think, was serendipitous. That her being there for that long, me basically kind of trying to shield one life from another life, my home life from who I was when I was out. Because when you have somebody who's deep in the throes of dementia, it's very hard to explain that to people. And especially at that age, I wasn't really mature enough to put that out there. So now, she passed, and then I started sort of kind of feeling like I could go out and maybe do a little bit more. I should go out and do a little bit more, and she just happened along within a matter of months. So the timing of it worked out. But so what drives me is just, what's next. That's where I'm at. What is next in this life that we've tried to put together for each other. And I think, broken foot aside, we're in a pretty good place. Better place than we've been at other times, for sure. And once we get through these physical ailments and sudden bills that crop up and things like that, there's not going to be a point where we're just going to be content and complacent or whatever else. There's always going to be something going on. I mean, my parents are well into their 70s and haven't stopped with that nonsense yet, so I don't expect it anytime soon. But there will be times where we will find ourselves in a spot where we can just sit back and appreciate what is going on, and that those brief moments of clarity in life, I think, are definitely a motivating factor. What do you do when life throws a curveball or piles molasses in the road? What do you do to overcome them? It's highly situational. Strength of our relationship, strength of family, trusting and relying on others is something that I think is underrated, and part of what's I think is pretty good about this community is that there are people who definitely exemplify having strength in situations that maybe you don't expect. My wife mocks me occasionally that I can't cook an egg, but and she has too, but I've literally been responsible for saving somebody's life. And I did security and dealt with dangerous types and dealt with emergencies and fire evacuations and alarms going off and things like that, minding a building during a friggin' hurricane. But if something as simple as minute rice is daunting, so that lends to the idea that it's perspective as well. And so in a lot of cases what I do is I use my experience in past situations, any things that I've been trained to do in doing the security gig for a while, if it's something of that nature. If it's something of more of an emotional nature, I hearken back to the days where I was in therapy, or just try to just boil it down to logic, rationality. And people talk to me about how I am very direct and literal, and I find that a way to kind of manage my own mental stress, which exists, has always, will always. But if I am in a situation, if I'm expressing that to you, then that means that I trust you. I don't just go around blurting that out. Which is why this is probably a very different tone to a video than you guys know from me, because up until this point it's been the person that I choose to project to you all, and not me. We just like when you're dating somebody, it's not really you on the first few dates. It's your representative, the parts of yourself that you're electing to put out there for public consumption. Unless you're just unabashed and put yourself out there immediately, which I have still haven't met those people. But so that's a summary of that. Type of music, starting in I believe it was 1996. So we are going on almost 20 years now. There has been a single album that I will listen to start to finish when I need to get motivated to do something, when I've studied, when I've taken tests, when I'm trying to get motivated to do a physical activity, a chore, things like that. That is the album Hate Breeds Satisfaction is the Death of Desire. And it's a lot of, it's hardcore music. It's East Coast hardcore, metal riffs at punk speeds, and a lot of sort of subculture kind of things. But there's an inspirational tone to all of their music, while, some people will see, song titles, even just the name of the band, and think it's negative. There's always a place of strength and positivity and the will to overcome and all that. And that first major album that they put out, full-length album, is one that I will always go back to. It's not a very long album, but that specifically. And then just sort of music that allows me to express sometimes the stuff rattling around in my head that I don't want to express myself. I guess would be a good way to summarize my choice in music. Occasionally reflective stuff. Sometimes when I'm in like a down mood, I'll listen to other down music to sort of like get the idea, hey, it's I'm not the first person to think this way, kind of thing. But mostly just kind of get myself over the hump music. And favorite wrestler as a kid and why? It was the Warrior, man. Everybody, I think, had some sort of connection with the Ultimate Warrior. I know you guys, with the whole metal music and the choice of, wearing a lot of black stuff and things like that, would think the Undertaker, and I was a fan of his, but the Warrior was it. And then when I got over the whole, WWF is the only thing in existence, it was later became Taz from ECW when I did discover ECW in the mid '90s. But going back to the days of being very small, the first favorite, we'll say, was the Warrior. And just the speed and the frenzy and just the epic battles that he would have, and then finding out later what all that did to him as a person, and all the struggles and the personal stuff that he had go on, kind of really made me connect. Whereas there were other guys who the biggest hurdle that they had to overcome was testifying in a lawsuit that they did or did not take drugs because the WWE told them to. or WWF at the time, told him to. You know, and the rest of the time they're doing movies and living in mansions and whatever, and I never connected with those guys. They're guys who are just immense from birth and just never really resonated with me. But you know, that was my guy. It was the Ultimate Warrior growing up, and then, as I said, you know, Taz later on when, you know, I became aware of ECW. But I believe that covers all the bases. Yeah, that'll do, sir. And this is well over 10 minutes, so I will stop now. Dave, thank you for the contest. Thank you for the opportunity to reflect and put out a video that's not as superfluous as maybe a lot of our other videos are. I know that my problems and struggles and whatnot are not nearly as bad as many other people's. People with, you know, sick kids and you know, other major issues that I can't even, you know, compare to mine, but they are no less real to me, and I think that's another part of the process is you know, acknowledging and validating your own concerns, and understanding that is one way that you can build self-worth is, you know, hey, I am a person who has dealt with things in their life and my life, and overcome them, so I have to give myself credit and acknowledge that. That's probably another good what do you do when life throws a curveball kind of answer, is, you know, take stock of who you are and give yourself credit before, you know, putting your nose to the grindstone and working your way through whatever that problem is. So, Dave, Joshjohnson55 and his What Makes You You contest. If you've lasted this far, appreciate it. And get amongst the contest. Alright, YouTube. Peace.